All right, Matt, thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
You bet. You bet. I'm excited to talk to you because you are one boring individual that does not like to do a lot.
Yeah, I mostly sleep.
Lots of napping in between the sleeping.
Right.
You've done quite a few things in your young career. You're sort of quite literally the serial entrepreneur, as I think of you. So maybe just give us the quick 30-second version of all the different things you've done or are doing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, with my almost everything I've done has been in partnership with my brother, which has been pretty cool. The first thing we did, we run an IT managed services provider, which mostly works with K-12 schools. That started when Kevin was 17. Kevin's my brother, you know him. But so that's the thing we've been doing the longest. 23 years. 5 days ago was our 23rd anniversary, so that's kind of crazy. But and yes, now you know Kevin's more than 40. But so that Macro Connect is the thing we've been doing the longest together. About 3 years ago, though, we opened a co-working space. We renovated a former police station that was built in 1897 down in Detroit, and we renovated that into the office space for Macro Connect and into a co-working space. So we've been running that for about 3 years. And that's been really cool to become really, deeply part of a neighborhood that's starting to come back in the city. And then the third thing, there's lots of other little things we work on, but the third major thing is MarkSetBot, which is a autonomous buoy. Pardon me?
And the city is Detroit, by the way.
Detroit, yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Sorry. And then the third is MarkSetBot, which is an autonomous buoy that's used to set up automatically sailboat race courses. Has other applications as well. It's basically a water-based drone, but that's kind of an interesting startup technology. So we go from a business that's really established, 23 years old, to real estate, totally different industry, and then to a startup in a very young space. We also, in the middle of that, owned a restaurant for 6 years, which was a lot of fun too, but also very different.
I said Detroit earlier because this is a internationally acclaimed podcast.
I'm sure it goes everywhere. Yeah, no, it's a good point, and we're very proud that it's Detroit too.
Much like your MarkSetBot sales of water drones around the world. So we got to start there because that one's just the most fascinating, I think, and probably one that most of us have no idea what the heck you're talking about. So what is it?
Yeah, so the basically when you a sailboat race course typically has 3 to 5 inflatable buoys that get moved around based on where the wind is blowing, and you try to set a course. The most common race course is straight into the wind and straight out of the wind, and so because the wind constantly changes, you're effectively the race committee that's putting the race together is usually out there on a powerboat. They drop these in the water with anchors, and then if the wind changes, someone's got to drive out, pull up the anchor, set it down somewhere else. Effectively, what we've done is made a product that now, we did the first we call it Race OS, is an extension of MarkSetBot. We ran the first fully automated sailboat race. The racers were all human, but the course ran itself completely. That's the first time that's ever been done in the world. So we ran that in October. It was kind of cold, but worthwhile. But basically, you can imagine how much effort, how much fossil fuel needs to be burned in places where you have coral reefs and things like that. The damage that the anchors from those marks can do. So this is a huge thing, and that's where the competition that you and I spoke about earlier, World Sailing, which is the entity that kind of oversees sailing competition throughout the world, has something called their 11th hour sustainability challenge. And so MarkSetBot is a finalist for that because of all of the potential positive impacts and the greener. You think of sailing as a fairly green sport, most people do, because you got boats out there that just move with the wind. The problem is when we need all those courses set up and things moved around, you've got power boats. And, if you've ever been near like a small power boat, when someone pulls that cord to start the motor, the cloud of black smoke that comes out of it. Well, the MarkSetBot is electric. It'll run for a day on an entire day on a charge. And so basically it has almost no environmental impact to operate it. And that's we've had some studies done showing that it's a tremendous positive impact on the environment, or an improvement, I guess, minimizing the impact of our sport.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense too. You're not dropping anchors and hitting coral reefs, because these races happen. I'm sure there's thousands of races around the world every single week that most of us that don't sail have no idea about.
No, it's true. I mean, it is some of the market research we did as we were building this. I mean, there are clubs in almost every country. I mean, I guess a completely landlocked country in the desert probably doesn't have a yacht club, unless it's a really ironic one. But I think it's a sport that in the US, we think of it as being an exclusive thing. Only, rich people are doing it and stuff, but it's really a sport that's enjoyed all over the world by all different types of people. And a lot of that just has to do with the types of boats. When you watch a movie, it's a 100-foot boat raced by Dick DeVos, it's like those epic vessels. But most of the sailing that happens is done on boats, that are less than 20 feet long. And like the boat we have, I used to tow with my Volkswagen Golf. So, I mean, this is not a yacht by any stretch.
You're not buddies with Sir Richard Branson. Is that what you're trying to tell us?
Well, he's my buddy.
Got it. Well, that's so cool. And, this is a podcast about leadership and about culture. And, you think about what it takes to start a business. In your case, starting multiple businesses in very different industries. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. What does it take for you to move from an idea into action? Because lots of us have ideas, right? Everybody has ideas, but very few people actually get into action.
Yeah. Well, your wife, you should have her on board on the podcast too, given that she's someone who's certainly done that very successfily too.
If I can get her people to call me back, I will.
That's right. I'm sure it's hard to get on her schedule these days, but no, I think a huge part of it is passion. And I think it's amazing the impact, the number of people who will follow you when they see that you're operating based on passion. Because I think only rarely is passion about just money and financial success. I think when it's directed in the right way, it can lead to a lot of that. But I think mostly people, particularly the younger generations, they want to believe in something first and then put all of their effort into it and try to turn that into, a career or, some financial success. And I think that's one thing that Kevin and I have always done, is gotten involved in the things that we wanted to be doing first and foremost. And we've been able to find people who want to do it with us because they understand we're doing it for, the right reasons, and that we're in it to change something or make something better first and foremost. And then, as a kind of secondary thing, to turn it into a big financial success. We're of course always hoping that with a business, it has to be about the finances, because the best idea that never happens isn't worth anything, right? The best intentions aren't worth anything unless they turn into execution.
Yeah. Well, they're worth something. They're worth people telling stories about how, I had Facebook as an idea before they did, and that's great.
And everyone's like, yeah, sure you did. No, but it's true. But I think you can't. It's hard to. So even the MarkSetBot team, that's really new, and there are a lot of people who are working on it on a part-time basis, some paid, some unpaid. But with that, I think so many of those people, and Kevin's really the lead on that. I can't take credit for it, other than that I try to push him sometimes when I feel like he's getting too deep into a rabbit hole on something or whatever, because he does so much of the product design work with it. It's really his concept, and the patents and all of that are they actually, my name's on them too, but I don't deserve them. But I think it's that passion that's pulled the people in, but to do things at scale, you have to have other people involved. And I think that's something we've done a good job of, is getting people excited about these ideas. And so, he's got probably 10 people or more that are working on that. And they've come from all different places, all over the the country, at least. We have even some international people, because as you said, I think the first one we sold was sold in Monaco, James Bond, Monaco. So it's, that's not what we expected to have to be thinking about selling something internationally when he was like floating this in the pool at the hotel he lives in. We were thinking, gosh, someday this will be in the Mediterranean, but it is.
Yeah. From idea to action, and all built around passion. And the other thing that I'd know, and it just came out, you just said a few things that sort of reinforce this, is this sense of humility, that it's not really about you. It's not really about your brother. It's about what you're doing, is sort of how I've seen it. I'm curious what your take is on, being a humble leader.
Yeah, I think I will say sometimes I take that to a fault. So that's probably one of the challenges that I struggle with, in that I want to always be engaged on the front lines where the mission is being delivered on. And so sometimes that actually limits our ability to scale things. But I think it's really important. Again, if you want good people around you, I think it's only incidental, and it's only temporary when you see some of these organizations that have been very successful, but the person at the top is hogging the limelight constantly. I think so often those organizations fall apart. I think particularly the small ones. You think about, Tesla and some of the things that Elon Musk does. Obviously, he's in the limelight as much or more than almost anyone. I have a feeling that it's not that his public persona is different than the one that has those teams working, but I don't really know that. Maybe when you get him on the podcast, you can dig into that more deeply. But I do think when you're doing things at a fairly small scale and at a local scale, to get people, some of our employees at Macro Connect. So Gordon, who actually worked with you at Cornerstone, he's been with us, I think, 15 of those 23 years. And to get people to stick around like that, I think if you're a jerk and you're always hogging the limelight and making it all about you, I think it's hard to keep good people like that around. And so I think fundamentally it's how our parents raised us, more than anything else. Like, we become those things. But I think it's been effective from that standpoint too, in that people feel like their ideas are worthwhile and that there's place for them to grow. Because even though I'm in a lot of those details, it's not because I don't want anything to happen without me. It's more because I just want to be engaged and helping to make sure I'm part of the mission, and not just like behind the scenes and napping all the time like I claim to do. Right? I just want to be engaged and working hard on it. So
Yeah. And I think there's another aspect of the humility that you realize that, and sometimes it actually gets in your way. It actually may tamp your ability to scale even more. And you guys, especially with Macro Connect, with the IT company, have had tremendous sort of double-digit growth year over year. That you have been able to scale that and are continuing to scale that. So talk a little bit about the culture there, and how do you build a high-performing culture?
Yeah, I think just to your point though, sometime even today, I had an experience where some things had happened that I learned about that I didn't know about. And I had to kind of step back and be like, well, I should be proud of this. I shouldn't feel left out. This is part of what success is the organization doing great things that I don't even know are happening. Yeah. So that, there's no question that's part of my growing up. And one of the things I'm good at, I think, is not saying what I first feel and digesting it and then being like, okay, I'm proud now. It's all right. But I think in terms of culture, so much of the stuff we already talked about, I think it comes into that, right? Like that culture of humility. But I think, and I think that where it really starts from is the purpose and the core values. So we use a system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, as a way of running our business. And one of the things that made us do was get super clear about what our core values are. That's part of the EOS process. And we've really baked that into so much of what we do now. So when we're interviewing, which we are constantly, because as you said, we've been growing, pretty quickly financially, and because it's a services business, you got to add headcount most of the time as you're growing revenue. But so in the hiring and firing process, one of the things that one of our last interviews is myself as the CEO. It's nice to be at this scale. We've got just over 30 people. But to be at this scale, I can still interview everyone, even interns who come and work for us. At some point, probably won't be able to do that, but I enjoy it while I can. But that last interview, we send people the listing of our core values, and we ask them to write down, explain a time where you lived this out. And then there's some other questions they have to answer, but they come in for the last interview with me with a little bit of intro to what's going on, but we pull that thing out and say, hey, here are the answers you gave. Let's talk more about this. And so I think getting clear on your core values and then using it, hiring, we use it in firing. We have a platform that's called Assembly, which is a great online platform. Again, I don't know if it scales to a company of 1,000 people or whatever, but you get a certain number of, we call it cheddar, but it's like a currency, and it's orange, like Macro Connect is orange. That's like the color of my polo here. That's one of our main logo colors. So we thought cheddar was a good thing, but you get this currency that refreshes each month. All you can do is spend it by recognizing people within the organization. The cool part is you recognize them based on your core values. So every day when someone does something good for someone else, we see these things flying back and forth, and someone gives someone 10 cheddar, or they give them 15 cheddar, but they have to put a note, and they can put a GIF in there too, an animated GIF that's got some kind of funny message or whatever. But that's happening every day. We then go through each week. We have an all-team meeting. It's mostly virtual these days, and we do a recognition at the start of that meeting, and that recognition is all driven by core values. So I might say, Tom, thank you so much for, working late the other night, for being tenacious and working late the other night. Or Tom, thanks for putting together that helping to pack food at Gleaners. That was a great way to be community minded. So we bring the core values in. It's in every day, it's every week, it's hiring, it's firing, and it's in our quarterly one-on-ones that managers do with their team members. So it's a really long answer to your short question about culture, but I think one of the most important things is getting clear on your core values and using it in everything you do that relate to your people. It can't just be stuff on the wall. It needs to be stuff that's being discussed constantly and used constantly by the team. Then it becomes real.
Yeah, because if it's just on the walls, it's actually, in my opinion, detrimental. It actually hurts a culture because it becomes a bunch of words on a wall that I didn't pick, but I have to sign up for. I have to comply with. I have to memorize. As opposed to living and breathing. If you think about Enron, one of their values was integrity.
Yeah.
Right? There's a great irony, and there's companies left and right that do that. They spend one day a year, maybe one day every 5 years, sort of going through their values and changing the words and wordsmithing it and putting it up on the wall, and that's it. When that's completely not only just useless and sort of neutral, it actually, like I said, can detract from a culture, because people look around and say, what are you talking about? That's not what I experience here. And what I hear from you is it doesn't matter what the specific words are. It's actually explaining what it means, talking about what it means, and giving examples of what it looks like.
And if you think about it, that's what Assembly does, right? Every time. Now, you don't necessarily, if someone screws it up, we don't step in and be like, well, that wasn't technically an example of being meticulous. That's not how we get into that, but it is. I mean, it makes it, the great part is it's also the team acknowledging each other, because it's powerful to have recognition from the top. It's powerful to have recognition in all different ways, but when everyone is thanking each other, gratitude is so important too, right? To a culture, frankly, success in life. But yeah, no, I think that stuff is really important but as long as it's real, because I think so many people do it because they think they're supposed to, and then their words and maybe they mean something. What I don't know is how you do that. I've done it with 30 some people, and I think we're pretty good at it. I don't know how you do it with 100 or with 1,000 or 5,000, or I don't know how many people Enron had working for them, but I can see where it would be very challenging for that to get embodied at all levels as an organization becomes, really, really big. But that's what you learn as you grow too, partially, right? As you figure out, you got to answer that question, I think, or you're going to, you not every business is going to become Enron with that level of, malfeasance and whatever, but you're going to move away from those values if you're not figuring out ways to continue to make sure people believe in them and that you're bringing people on board who live them.
Yeah. Well, it is very doable. I can tell you that because most of our clients are exactly in that sort of several hundred to several thousand employee range. And you're exactly right. There's no one way to do it, but there's a wrong way to do it, which is to not do it. And, bring it alive for everybody all the way down to the, to the people on the front line is.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
of the you guys work with lots of different organizations of different sizes. The ones that you see that are successful in this space, how many do you see have very strong core values, or how major a component is that for most of them?
Yeah, I would say that it's not so much, it's not so much what the values are, it's what they do. To your point, it's you can walk into an organization. I'm sure you could do the same thing. I can walk into an organization in non-pandemic times, of course, and within 2 or 3 minutes, you can almost taste the culture, and that's what we're talking about, is that you can feel it. You can feel that it's being lived as opposed to just some static words. And the same is true for mission and vision and values and philosophy and purpose. All that stuff is hugely motivating, hugely powerful, but it's worthless by itself. It's only in the being it that it matters. And so that's the difference maker, is the clients that get what you get, which is this stuff needs to be real. It needs to be living. It needs to be constantly reminded, constantly talked about. Those are the organizations that are really killing it when it comes to cultures.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
That was a first, the flip podcast. So we're almost out of time here, but I want to ask you a couple more questions, and one of them will be for a book recommendation, but we'll hold off on that for a second. If you had to do it all over again, given you've run all these multiple businesses and very, very different industries, what'd you learn through all that?
Yeah. I think for me, I think a lot of it comes back to passion. Like if there's something, if you want to be, if you want to start a business or do something like the things that we've done, it's important that you have that. It's important that you have that passion. Also important that you have the discipline. So many people I think it's not rare that people get excited by ideas. It's that, back to the execution that we were talking about, right? Like that's the harder part. But if you're not prepared to be disciplined and to work harder than almost anyone else, then you're probably not going to be super successful at what you're doing. But I think the first step is having the passion and just the sense of possibility. So, indulge that. So for someone who's thinking about something entrepreneurial, dream it, but then just be prepared to commit to it. We've done it, and I think success in these different industries isn't all that different. It takes a lot of the same stuff, and there's no question that running the restaurant taught us tons of lessons that we pulled into the managed services business. And because in the end, so much of any business is helping your people to be successful and getting the right people on board. And if you're not, I think that's one thing that I'm always doing, is learning from the people around me and learning from the things that I'm doing. And it's, the clients that I get close to, I still, work closely with at least a handful of our clients. And I'm learning stuff all the time. Sometimes it's things to do, other times it's things not to do. And I'll catch myself, I'm like, oh, that's a bad behavior. I've seen so-and-so do that. And then I can stop myself. But I think you have to be, I think if you stop learning like that, then you're likely going to stagnate, and your business is probably going to struggle too, because what got you to where you are today is not likely going to be what serves you tomorrow and what gets you to where you want to be in a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever that time window is.
Yeah, yeah. The passion is the most important element, but you got to follow it up with some discipline, some hard work, and you got to continually grow and improve. Because if you don't, you're gonna be left behind, just like in any industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it, love it. So, well, let's just end with the book. What's a book that you would recommend to the fellow leaders out there, fellow CEOs out there?
Yep. I believe the title is Endurance. It's a book, I read it probably more than 10 years ago even, but I loved it. And partially because I'm a sailor, but it's Ernest Shackleton. It's a book about I believe Endurance was the name of his ship that got stuck in the ice, but they traveled on a boat similar to the size that on like a lifeboat effectively off this ship where they were exploring the Antarctic. Their ship got stuck in ice and got crushed basically. And so his crew, he's one of these people who's, renowned as a leader basically, but they took a boat not much bigger than the one that we sail, on Lake St. Clair when it's sunny out, and sailed at something like 2,000 miles in the Southern Ocean. And most of the crew survived. They lost some fingers and toes and stuff like that, but it's just a fascinating story. I mean, as a sailor, it's a fascinating story, but it's also a story of, kind of human potential. We actually revised our job descriptions years ago after I read it, because he wrote a description of the job when he was trying to recruit people for this voyage. And I think one of the lines in it was something like, there's a high chance that you're going to die. Basically, it was like, you're signing up for something where you have a chance to be, to go places no one has ever gone, to do things no one has ever done, and you might not make it back. But what that did is it self-selected, right? Like the people who responded to that were not your average people, right? He selected a crew, back to core values, right? He selected a crew, just even with his job description, that was going to be prepared to go through what he knew they might have to go through, because it's dangerous. There's no GPS, there's none of that. They were using a sextant and the sun when you could see it, which is not often in the Southern Ocean, to navigate these kind of distances on this tiny little boat.
Yeah.
So it's a different story, but a really cool one, I think.
Yeah. So little disclaimer, check with your HR departments before you add that to your job.
Yeah, this is true. No, it's a good point. But I will say, we put things like that in our job description, not that you're going to die, but we're asking people, we go above and beyond for our clients. If something is broken and it needs to be fixed, you might not sleep that night. There's some of those sort of things have been in job descriptions, and we've had people actually tell us, like, well, I was looking through and I wasn't actually even that interested in getting back into that space, but your job description pulled me in and I was interested in looking at it. I would say it's tamed down a little bit in the last few years. It's gotten a little more run of the mill, but we still have some of that language in there, just to let people know that we take this seriously, and we don't take it lightly that when we're bringing people on board, only certain people are going to fit.
Yeah. That's another great way to just be real at the starting point, right?
There's no point in lying. I always tell people when I'm interviewing them, like, I know your job right now is to make me think you're perfect, and my job is to figure out all the things that are broken about you. But let's try to drop that, and let's actually realize that if I hire you and you're not the right person, it's not going to work out. And so let's agree to work on this when we're talking through the core values. Let's agree to be honest with each other on this, because it's not going to work for either of us if one of us isn't right for each other. So let's be as real as we can be.
Yeah. Which the world could use a healthy dose of, nowadays, and just be more real. All right, awesome. Well, thanks again for the time, Matt. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, thank you.